Welcome to another episode of What Did the Patient Say with Doctors Dana and Lauren Brindisi, sisters and owners of Carolina Functional Neurology Center. We are providing you answers to frequently asked questions and bringing you inside information from real conversations we have with patients on a daily basis. Our goal is to spread the truth on health and healing because we believe everyone deserves to know the answers.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of What Did the Patient Say with myself, Dr. Lauren Brindisi, with Carolina Functional Neurology Center. Today, we are going to be talking about the importance of sleep. Now, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I studied behavioral neuroscience in undergrad, and one of my main focuses was reading and understanding the literature on sleep. And we all know how important sleep is, but do you understand the things that are actually happening in your brain when you sleep and how sleep is impacted in such a variety of neurological conditions? We see patients across the neurological spectrum, and I would say the majority of them struggle with issues related to sleep. Also, I have plenty of friends and family members who don't have neurological conditions who also struggle with sleep. Why is sleep so important, and why are there so many of us struggling with getting a good night's sleep? Let's start by just thinking about something pretty simple when it comes to our day-to-day. We now, in modern society, are exposed to so much artificial lighting, whether that be this Ring camera that's behind me, whether that be the fluorescent lights that are in your office building, whether that be the blue light that's emitted from screens, from TVs. I mean, we are bombarded with technology all day long. And we are being exposed to this blue light that is extremely activating to the nervous system in ways that are impacting our circadian rhythm. Our circadian rhythm is our sleep-wake cycle. And so what normally happens is that our sleep-wake cycle is being driven by our exposure to light. It should be driven by our exposure to the sun. So what happens when we're sleeping? When morning comes, our eyes are closed, but the sun should rise, and we should then be able to see the light come in through our eyelids, which, right, you close your eyes, you're still going to know if it's light or dark. And when the sun rises, that light then triggers a signal in our brain. Specifically, we're talking about our hypothalamus, which will then trigger a cascade of signals that lead to our adrenal glands, which then secretes cortisol. Cortisol, we should have what's called a cortisol awakening response. So cortisol should be very high in the morning, and then it should basically taper off as the day goes on. Inversely related to that should be melatonin, which is also a hormone that is triggered by light. And as the sun goes down, we should start to trigger trigger melatonin, and that should rise, and that should start to make us feel sleepy, and then we should go to bed. And then we should wake up the next day and do it all over again. But of course, the majority of us now are spending way too much time inside. We are not linked with the sun. We're just as busy, in the winter as we are in the summer, even though there's drastically less light in the winter. And so we are artificially impacting our circadian rhythm when it comes to light. So some simple things that you can do if you are having trouble sleeping is really focus on your morning and your evening routine, especially as it pertains to your exposure to light. And one of the most important things you can do is start to dim the lights as it gets darker outside. Have your inside home mimic the type of light that you should be experiencing if you were spending more time outside. Our phones do it now. Our computers do it now. You can start turning off the overhead lights, and you can start dimming the lights. Some people actually, put in their home dimmers that are able to be on switches that coincide with outside. I think that's amazing. If you have the capability of doing that, I would highly recommend it. People switch out their lights or have light bulbs that can turn red. You can turn on a lamp at night. Just get dimmer, softer lighting as the day goes on. You should be avoiding technology a couple hours before bed. If you have to be on technology, especially, past noon, you should be wearing blue light blocking glasses like these. So you can see that it reflects the blue light. That's so when I'm wearing them, I'm not getting as much of that blue light into my retina and becoming very activating for my brain. You also want to manage your stress and be very particular about when you exercise. High intensity exercise is going to spike your cortisol levels. So you should be exercising in the morning. And if you're going to do any kind of physical activity later in the day, it should be something more relaxing, like stretching, a restorative yoga, just putting your legs up the wall, and allowing yourself to get into a more restful state. You shouldn't be watching high stress like the news or murder mystery or true crime right before you go to bed. You should be watching something, if you're going to watch anything a couple hours before bed, it should be something that's funny, lighthearted, relaxing, calming, or if you really have trouble sleeping, don't watch TV at night. You should be reading a book, listening to some soft music, just doing some gentle yoga, and turning the lights down and preparing your body for bed. Why is this so important? How is sleep impacting your brain? And this is the stuff that I really love to talk about. So, when we sleep, we actually consolidate memory. There was a study done that actually was by accident. So what they did was they implanted electrodes into mice. So we use mice a lot in neuroscience to be able to observe behavior. They're a great model for what could actually be happening in us as humans. And so they were doing this to study learning and behavior. And what they did was they took that signal and they basically converted it into sound. And so what they were doing was they were watching these mice move through a maze, and they were watching them do this basically over days at a time to see how they became more efficient and how they learned how to move through this maze. But on accident, what happened was that somebody left the machine on at night. And they all went home, and hopefully they went and got a good night's sleep. But they came back, and the machine was still on. And what they observed was that the sounds that were being transmitted from the mice's brains when they were sleeping were coordinating with the same sounds and signals that were being produced when they were going through the maze, which is just so fascinating to me. And what's actually kind of funny is there are a lot of really big breakthroughs in science that happen on accident. And because somebody forgot to turn the machine off, we now continue to have a better understanding about how we consolidate memory when we're sleeping. And this makes a lot of sense because there are some other theories when we talk about neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's, where we get buildup of these tau proteins, which these tau proteins, basically the theory is that they build up all day long. And what we have learned is that when we sleep, we have a component of our immune system that lives in our brain very specifically, that I think of it kind of like the janitorial staff that comes in at night and cleans everything up when you leave from work, and you come back and it all looks the same, but you never see them. So this brain janitorial staff comes in and it sweeps out the tau proteins, and then you wake up the next day and the cycle starts all over again. However, if you don't sleep well, the janitorial staff does not come, and those tau proteins continue to build up. And it's not like the next day they are able to get everything done and clean all of it up. So over time, these tau proteins can start to build up, and these are the same tau proteins that we see that are impacting the nervous system in people who have Alzheimer's. And so we do see that people with Alzheimer's have a lot of trouble sleeping. We see this too in patients who have Parkinson's disease. And so they develop changes in the shape and the fold of their what's called alpha-synuclein, which is a protein that helps with the transmission and signaling of neurotransmitters that allow one neuron to communicate with another. And this specifically happens in the basal ganglia. Well, these patients also have trouble with sleep. And so sleep is so important for the overall health of our brain for a lot of reasons. It helps us to re-regulate, consolidate memory, impacts our immune system within our brain. And there's also been studies in behavioral neuroscience on college students where they basically put them in this room and they had all this fun stuff that they got to do while they were there. They, brought them snacks and had video games for them to play, and they all just got to hang out for like 5 days. But the caveat was they basically would wake them up every time they started to go into REM sleep. And they were monitoring all sorts of physiological processes that were happening when they were sleeping, and what was happening over the course of those 5 days when they weren't able to go through full cycles of REM, which should happen like every 90 minutes. And so one of the really profound things is they were assessing organ function. And all of these students started to become pre-diabetic just after 5 days of not getting proper sleep. The other thing that they did is they put them through a sobriety test. So they had them do like a driving game, and the majority of them looked like drunk people. They could not drive, they could not stay in the lanes, they could not coordinate what was going on. Your brain completely starts to unravel if you are not getting good sleep. So, when we talk about some of the basics of our health and wellness, sleep should be at the top of your list. And if you are not sleeping well, one, rewind and go back to the beginning of this video and listen to some of the recommendations that I had for you. If you have been trying on your own to get better sleep and it is not working, you need to consult a provider who is going to look a little bit deeper. Sleep is a complex thing that our brain does, and there are all sorts of neural pathways and areas in our brain that are responsible for our ability to properly sleep. And you need someone who's going to not only assess the function of your brain, but it's going to take a more holistic look at understanding things like your blood sugar, your stress levels, your health history. Again, patients who have concussions, who have all sorts of neurological conditions struggle with sleep. And so the approach to improving your sleep can be very individualized from one patient or person to the next. But it is vital that you're sleeping because this is how you heal. Anytime I have a patient with bad insomnia, I already know that it's going to be an uphill battle. And one of my top priorities, first and foremost, is figuring out how even slightly moving the needle as fast as we can and getting them sleeping a little bit better. And some people do need some support, whether that be some medications or some supplementation. But I will say that there are a lot of very conservative behavioral, dietary, and supplemental changes that can be done to improve somebody's sleep before we pull out the big guns and send them to a medical neurologist and get them on some medication that sometimes has irreversible side effects. So don't start with the sleep meds. Don't start with the sleep over the counters. Really start to investigate why you're not sleeping well and the things that you can do to improve that naturally. And just like I said from the beginning, one of the easiest things is your exposure to light. A lot of people want, to have the blackout curtains. Don't have blackout curtains. You have to be exposed to light. We also, I know, a lot of us live in major metropolitan areas and we have a lot of light pollutants at night. So you can get crafty. There are ways, right? Maybe wear an eye mask at night. And, if you roll over and it's morning, like make sure you're taking it off. Make sure you're getting that exposure to the light so you don't have to have completely blackout curtains. You can get crafty with it for sure. And you should be prioritizing your sleep. This is how you're going to fast track the healing process. So, thank you guys for listening. If you want any more information about sleep, please comment, DM us. If this is something that resonated with you, definitely reach out. If you're having trouble sleeping and you have a neurological condition, we are here to help. If you know somebody who's struggling with these issues, share this. By sharing this information and putting this out there, just like we're working really hard to get this information out there, you help put functional neurology on the map. Help us make functional neurology mainstream. Thank you so much for listening. Again, I'm Dr. Lauren Brindisi with Carolina Functional Neurology Center, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye.